This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and I'm coming to you from the Tokyo Club in downtown Tokyo. Reason being is that we have taken Rugby Unity on the road, and for this coming week we'll be spending most of the week getting out and about talking to people in Japanese rugby about where they see Japan's role in helping to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. Japanese rugby took a massive step forward in 2019 when they took on the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and it was simply a transformative event for the sport. And indeed, a number of the sponsors who were involved in that particular program through the World Cup have stayed with rugby, whether it's Asahi or Lipper Vatan D, Taisho, Mitsubishi Estate. And again, Japan Rugby has also put their hat in the ring for the 2035 Rugby World Cup. So, obviously, the Wallabies versus Japan takes place at the National Stadium on October the 25th. But during the week, we'll be speaking to people like Koji Tokamatsu. We'll be speaking to Will Genya. We'll be speaking to the chairman of Japan Rugby, Glenn Delaney, and also the coach of the women's team, plus lots of other people. There's lots of media events and everything that's going along around the big test match later in the week as well. So we thought it was worth our while to come up here and pursue our mission. And Eddie Jones, it's an easy flight, isn't it, from Australia up to Japan? I jumped on the plane at 10 o'clock last night. I was here at 6 o'clock this morning and have been going flat out ever since.
Yeah, probably one of the more easier flights in the world, mate. Same time zone, get on, have a sleep, and you're there. It's good to see you dressed up nicely, mate. To take our club.
Well, I have to. I had to wear the tie, but it did actually make me think today in terms of doing business. And one of the big emerging themes of Rugby Unity is this need for us to continue to work together. To join up and really it's an easy way to do business. It's an easy way for people in Australia to be able to travel overnight to get to Tokyo and to get started. Clearly, the cultures are quite different, but as a way of coming together, I do think that could be a very easy way for people to, grow the game and grow the cooperation between Japanese rugby and Australian rugby.
Well, it seems like they put you in the restroom there, mate.
It's the only place in the Tokyo Club where you are allowed to speak. And so I am outside. I'm outside the toilet.
Right.
But mate, you've got to do this. We've got to make programs, and if this is the only place I could find, we're making it work here. But anyway, getting back to it, it's so easy. It just struck me of, okay, this is a real opportunity, particularly for Australian rugby, to be able to use this market because, Tokyo, it's a city of 33 million people. There has to be a way where we can work more effectively together.
Yeah, but I think the point is together. I think Japan's always just been seen as a way to get money. I think realistically that's how most countries have looked at Japan, and I think it needs to be reciprocal because Japan now, whilst it's not in the top 10, is at the top table of international rugby as how other countries can help Japan get stronger. And that needs to be a proper reciprocal relationship, which takes time and effort. And money to do. But certainly I think for the growth of world rugby, there's an opportunity to use Japan's economic resources to make rugby stronger.
And so, obviously New Zealand rugby have been involved in Japanese rugby for a long time, but perhaps Australia not so much over the years.
Well, I think Australia's always had a more insular view. I think, if you look historically, Australia hasn't gone out of its way to promote rugby in the Pacific, and then you're going further north. Australia really hasn't done that. I think part of it's been they've been a very successful rugby country in their own way, and they probably haven't seen the need to do that. But now increasingly with the the rugby market in Australia is shrinking, they're going to need to expand it. Whereas New Zealand's always been more aggressive in that area. I think, in the Pacific particularly, they've set up 3 academies in Fiji, Tonga and Samoa. So they've been pretty sharp about it. They might be unofficial academies. But I think, I was speaking to you today, I reckon that's one of the things under threat at the moment, thinking about how rugby league generally has taken a footprint in those countries, particularly Tonga and Samoa, less so Fiji. And it's a real challenge for rugby to make sure that those islands stay rugby aligned and not more aligned to rugby league, because if we do lose those countries, we'll lose a lot of talent. You look at the World Cup where Tonga provides not only one team but probably provides at least another 30 or 40 players for other countries in terms of Tongan players. And Japan's, always had a strong relationship with Tonga. There's, 80, maybe 100 players playing in the various leagues, university league, high school leagues. So they've been a rich source of player development.
Now, look, I do want to come to Peter V'landys and his comments around R360, but perhaps before we get to that, it would have sent the shivers down the spines of World Rugby to watch the vision of the Tongan team arriving in Tonga ahead of the Pacific Championships. Peter V'landys and Rugby League have said very clearly that Rugby League is the preferred sport of the Pacific, and he uses it as a key message and he talks about it all the time. And they've recently secured $600 million from the Australian government, which is going to support a new team, a new NRL team in Papua New Guinea. But there is going to be a fairly substantial amount of money left over to continue the development of rugby league in the Pacific Islands, and Tonga in particular is a real focus for them, as is Fiji. I would have thought that World Rugby really would be very concerned about the inroads that Rugby League are making in the Pacific Islands.
Well, obviously they're not, mate. Like, the obvious answer is they're not. Like, this year they cancelled the Pacific Challenge, which was the Samoan, Fiji, Tongan under-20 teams plus Japan. So that's a clear message that they're not concerned. Like, if you were concerned, you wouldn't be doing that, mate. So let's be clear about this. World Rugby haven't shown a concern. They think, and it's a bit of rugby arrogance, mate, I reckon. We see this all the time. They just think they're going to, because they've been a rugby country, they're going to follow that. But they're not. They're not. And when you stop investing in the youth, which they have, then there's a price to be paid. And I think, a little bit of evidence of that was seen of the influence of the Tonga Rugby League team in Tonga. How many fans were out there welcoming the team. It's a real worry for rugby. And the surprising thing is World Rugby don't care, mate. Well, if they did care, no, let's be right, Pemby. If they did care, they would have invested in a program that was important for those 3 countries and for Japan. But they decided not to. They decided to de-invest in that program, and that's going to come with a cost. So they make all these beautiful statements, but they've got to follow through on it.
Well, it's to me, and where I'm looking at it from, Peter V'landys, who's a very artful communicator, he keeps talking about rugby league being the game of the Pacific, and now that he's got his $600 million, they are going to continue to invest in the Pacific. But interestingly, it's in the Australian Parliament last week, there's a process called Senate Estimates where the bureaucrats have to answer questions from the senators, and it was revealed last week that there is a package being developed by the Australian government in support of rugby in Samoa, Tonga, to a lesser extent Fiji, about $150 million that's being developed. And I did notice that when Fiji played Australia at Newcastle, the Prime Minister was there. Siddhaveti Rambuka, the Fijian Prime Minister, was there. And I think it's not too far away where there will be a fairly sizable announcement. And I do think World Rugby is involved in it as well. But not a minute too soon, really, to do something to try to take on what is an absolute juggernaut, because the National Rugby League is a very well-funded organisation. They have very wealthy television rights, and they've got, there are limited places that they can spend their money, and the Pacific Islands is one place where they are going to continue to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, yeah. The writing's on the wall, mate.
No, it is. It is. I think it's an absolute serious threat to rugby, and we really do need to keep an eye on that and wait to see what happens with this $150 million. So, moving along, R360, Peter V'landys, it certainly has exercised a number of the chief executives of the clubs, and they have come out and said that any player, coach, referee, anybody who even takes a look at R360, that they will be banned from involvement in the National Rugby League in Australia for 10 years. It's certainly gathered huge amounts of attention. What do you think of Peter V'landys and his 10-year ban?
Well, he can grab a headline. That's the one thing we know. Yeah, and he's very good at doing it. As you said, they're PR smart, the NRL at the moment, which never used to be the case. Yeah, and he leads the charge there, whether it's him or the team underneath him. But I think, most people would say that he's jumping at shadows. There's probably 3 or 4 players who are at the end of their career being chased by R360, and we still don't know the extent of R360. So I don't think it's a serious threat to rugby league, as Gus Gould said, but is it over the top? Well, he's made a statement. It's all everyone's talking about, everyone's reading about it. So it puts rugby league at the tip of everyone's tongue again. Sharp, mate.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Very true. Now, the only person who made bigger headlines last week than Peter V'landys around the world was, in fact, you, with your support of R360. Tell me again, restate your case again for R360, and I'll tell you my version of it.
It's not so much for R360. I think, the way rugby is at the moment, and it needs something to shake it up. I really think it needs something to shake it up. I was part of a little program where we started to start up a 12-a-side competition, and we had a bit of a go, but we weren't able to really get it off the ground. And I think rugby union needs an IPL type game that encourages new spectators to come in. Like, Test match rugby is the pinnacle, and we should never affect that at all. But underneath that, I think we need a new entertainment brand of rugby that attracts new spectators. Still have domestic competitions, international rugby, and then we have this other brand of entertainment rugby that brings new spectators to the sport, because we need to expand and we need to get more money in the game. Like, that's evident. We need to get more money in the game. I think everyone understands that, and I'm not supporting the actual format of R360, but I think having a disrupting influence in the game now is almost vital for it to keep growing.
But you don't think that rugby can continue to evolve under its own devices, that it needs an external shock to be able to change, that it won't change itself?
Well, I think if you
evolve.
If you look at most sports, something like that's happened. Like in 1919 in America, right? Roosevelt was the president, I think, and they played like a version of rugby union in American football, right? And they were smashing each other, and they were actually getting some really bad injuries. And I don't know whether this is factual or not, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And then Roosevelt said, we've got to invent something that gets the ball going forward, so they invented the forward pass, and that's how NFL came out. And so then NFL started, and they had a fight between two organisations, and out of it came out NFL today. And you look at most sports, that's happened at some stage. Like cricket, we know in Australia, particularly World Series cricket, was the forerunner of everything that's happened in cricket in Australia. You know, the cricket as a sport was slowly declining. Everything was based on the national team, and World Series brought new spectators in, brought new ideas in. We've seen it with the IPL and Rugby League again in Australia. The Super League brought a new investment into the game, and look at the game now, how healthy it is. And I reckon rugby needs the same, mate.
Well, I would disagree with you. I don't think the game is in quite the dire straits that you would paint it as. Certainly at the international level, things are looking in pretty good shape. I think you change the pathways to international football at your own risk. There's no question that R360 would undermine those traditional pathways the way it's been outlined at the moment. So all of a sudden you jeopardise the key part of your game, because do we know if R360 is going to prepare players to play international football? We don't know. But the other big problem we've got...
It's not there for that, mate. It's not there for that. That's where I think, like, to argue that is not a congruent argument, because it's meant to be something outside the main system. It's not meant to be a development system. The development systems are there. It's meant to be something that encourages new people to come to the game. What encourages new people to come to the game now?
Well, better communication, I would argue. We've got to do a better job of joining. We've got so much.
How long have you been saying that for? How long have you been saying that for, Pemby?
I've been saying it for a long time.
Right.
No,
it hasn't happened. Hasn't happened,
well,
right? Hasn't happened.
It's improving. It's improving.
How's it improved?
No, it is.
Look at the World Rugby strategic plan. That was due 4 months ago. There's still nothing out. And the only thing they talk about is $250 million US to the USA Rugby. Like, what a joke.
Okay. No, all right. Well, I'm not going to defend that, because I agree with you that was a huge opportunity missed. A huge opportunity missed. We needed the momentum off the back of the Women's Rugby World Cup. But there is what I see are a lot of things that need to be joined up in the first interest and I don't think we need an external shock. We need incremental improvement. Now, if a company like Red Bull Marketing comes along and says, okay, we are going to invest in rugby because we see a pathway, that's an enormous positive. We've seen improvements in the Premiership. We've seen improvements in the URC. We've seen improvements in Super Rugby. And just to your point, it is R360 is, well, they were proposing it as a pathway because they were going to make players available to play international rugby. And that's what they were going to be playing just before they were going to be selected for their country. So R360 clearly thought that they were going to be that level of the sport that prepared people for international rugby. Now, I have no confidence in R360 to be able to do anything, because none of them have any experience about the preparation of players, the marketing of major competitions. Look, the whole, but again, and this is my frustration, is that we don't know what we're talking about, because no one comes out and says anything. Now, Mark Spores, for the first time, has gone on the record and come out and said, oh, well, Peter V'landys is overreacting. The major unions are overreacting. All we're trying to do is what's right by the players and what's right by the game. That is absolute tosh. They are bandits. They are coming in and they are trying to take part of our game. They are socialising the costs. They are privatising whatever profits that they think they're going to get. And it is a privatisation of the sport. Can you imagine the NFL in America allowing anyone to come near their sport and say, oh, hang on, well, we're just going to do it our way. We're just going to come in and we're just going to let you do it. We're just going to let you take part of our game. As I say, mate, they're bandits. They should not be involved in the sport, and they should be investing their time, effort and energy, working through the processes and the teams that are there at the moment. So anyway, that's my view.
Yeah, but I'd compare it to what IPL's done. Like, IPL was not in the calendar, and they created this 8-week, 10-week competition where the players got well paid to play an entertainment form of cricket. And if you watch the early IPL, it was full of players who looked out of place. But since then, it's matured into a a serious competition where it has helped produce better players for the world game of cricket. There's no doubt about that. And I think R360 maybe has the potential to do something a little bit different for the game, bring some new sponsors in the game, bring some new fans into the game, and give the players a bit of fun. And if they get well paid, so be it. Like, I think it's got potentially a really important place to play in rugby.
Playing rugby in Lisbon is not like playing cricket in India. Like, let's call that out for a start. Playing rugby in Miami is not playing cricket in India. Like, don't draw a line between the IPL and R360. Seriously, it's not like the IPL.
Why?
Sorry, Ewen McKenzie. Well, because it's a different thing. I do. Oh, well, that's what they've told us. They've told us that they're going to play in Miami, they're going to play in Boston, they're going to play in Lisbon. Like, come on, give me a break. Actually, I do have to call you out, Eddie, and say it's very generous of you to spend time in what has been and is an extremely busy time of your preparation. Huge amount of work at the moment. How are things going? And the big game tomorrow in Osaka between Australia A and Japan A, and clearly then next week, the big challenge to take on the Wallabies here in Tokyo.
Yeah, well, tomorrow, I think it'll be an indicative game of the depth of both the countries. It's clearly Australia's next level down, and for us particularly, it's young Japanese players. I think it's a great opportunity for them to test themselves, and I think generally speaking, as we've spoken about on this program, it's great to see Australia doing well. It's great to see Australia move back in the top echelon of world rugby, and for us, it's a great opportunity for our young team to play against one of the best teams in the world. They've been really good, particularly in developing that half pitch attack, playing off the nine. Their commitment to defence, their ability to scramble has been outstanding. So it's a real honour for us to play against them next week in the National Stadium. We've had a good preparation here. We've had 50 players in camp. I don't know how many staff we've got, mate. Like, every time I look around, there seems to be a new staff member coming. I think, what's he doing? Trying to keep it. But it's been interesting, and, it should be a good couple of weeks of rugby.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And really, when you think about it, I think you were saying the other day, maybe 50,000 could be there at the National Stadium. The Wallabies have been used to playing in front of these big crowds. Certainly, a lot of your players will never have seen that type of crowd before. So it will be a lot of home support, but it could be an overwhelming environment for a young Japanese team.
Yeah, well, in the PNC, most of our teams had about 150 caps. Now, Leachy comes back into the 23, he's got 98 by himself. And interesting, we trained on Wednesday, did a reasonably hard session, and he was last on the field running, doing some extra sprint work, which is great to have him back in the squad. At the age of 37, I think he is, still wanting to work hard, still wanting to contribute a real plus for us.
So there's a fair gap between Australia and Japan in terms of rankings in the world. So what's a good outcome for Japan in this particular match ahead of the tour when you're heading away to play in Europe? I think what would you be happy with?
You go into every game wanting to win, and you're preparing to win. And if you don't win, it's a failure. That's the bottom line. But what do we want to do? We want to make sure at the start of the game we make a statement. We want to make sure at the end of the game we're in a chance to win it. The thing you can get blown away, particularly when you've got a young team against a more experienced, stronger team, is that you watch them play for the first 20 minutes. I can remember playing with Link for New South Wales against the All Blacks, and literally the team watched them play. And didn't get into the game. And it was completely different when Randwick played the All Blacks. We just tucked into them. And so that's what you want to see. I want to see our team tuck into them early, give ourselves a chance of winning, and then just hang in there for as long as we can.
What do you see as the biggest threats, though, from this Wallaby team who have impressed everybody this year so far with the way that they've played the game?
Well, when they get in space, like Sawali one-on-one's a difficult guy to tackle, and Jorgensen just like sniffs tries out of nothing. So they're two try scorers for it. And then the consistency of their ball carry is pretty good. You know, Wilson's been good. And then McWright's threat around the breakdown, he's getting 2 or 3 jackals a game. He's really come on as a really accomplished world number 7 now.
So just a final question before I let you go. In terms of that period where you have the Lions series, you have the Rugby Championship, really tough, hard rugby. You then get a bit of a break, which they've now had, but they've come back together. How do teams retain the benefit of that hard rugby while also acquiring benefits from resting? What's that balance and that challenge in terms of what do you take from it that's a positive from both sides, from both that hard rugby that you've had and then the rest period that you've had as well, and then what's the challenge of getting going again?
Well, the hard part of it, when you've done it a number of times, is that you can do it, right? You can do it, so you got that belief you can do it. The physical part is freshening yourself up, doing the appropriate amount of training to keep you in reasonable condition. Don't drop off too much, but feel physically refreshed, and then retain that mental hardness. And I think that's the thing that's impressed everyone about Australia this year is their mental toughness, their ability to stay in the game, play good, intelligent rugby to stay in the game. They've done that in nearly every test. Maybe the last 2 New Zealand tests, they weren't as good in that area. But certainly for the vast majority of the season, they've been very good in that area. And that goes down to Wilson's leadership. I think Skelton had a key role to play, particularly in the early tests. And he'll be missed for the Australian game.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
So Ewen McKenzie, if you're Joe Schmidt and you're preparing the Wallaby team for this type of tour where you're coming to Japan and then obviously you've got England the week after and a number of the top teams after it, is it a risk that you look past Japan and you underestimate them?
100%. I think, I think the biggest friend for Eddie is going to be the Wallaby selections, because I think that's exactly it. And I just literally read an article where Joe's quoted there sort of saying that they're looking at maybe mixing up some combinations, and talked about the centre combination, which has played the last 6 tests, or not quite that, but Sawali's played every game. That they might actually, I get the impression that they might actually rotate a few players, and so that's the biggest friend for Eddie, I think, in terms of Australia going in with different combos again, some of their strike players maybe not being there, etc. And so that's in a way, you're looking to the England game and seeing what, freshening guys up for that, but that might be a mistake, because I've been impressed with the Japanese efforts in the Pacific Cup. I think that's been pretty, I think they've been pretty good. And I'm sure that Australia's looked at them, so I don't think there's any risk that they'll be backing their players to be able to handle that. But I think it's a really good circumstance there for an interesting game. So I'm actually, I didn't get the chance to say that to Eddie, but that's what I'll be. The Wallaby selections will be his greatest friend, I think, possibly the way I'm reading it.
Well, we'll be able to talk about those on Friday when we have a look at that particular team. But then, if you're Joe Schmidt, you're trying to get ready. Selections aside, how are you preparing the team at this point to get ready for that northern tour and obviously the stop off in Tokyo along the way?
They've already made the philosophical decision not to play, early in the tour anyway, not to play Skelton and Wilson and Ikitau, the guys that have gone to the Northern Hemisphere. So that's sort of, they've been clear on that. So they've picked a different squad. So you've already got some new combinations going on. So you've got to try and bed those in and get some sort of touring focused. I never advocated because the media always asks you the question, if you win 3 out of 4 or 2 out of whatever, is that going to be a successful tour? And I hate those sort of questions because I'm always going out there. I want to win every game. You're not interested in trying to shorten up the win-loss side of things. But so they'll be going there. I would have thought they'll be going there to try and win every game. That's where the selection side of it is important, because you've already reduced some of the key players from the recent Test matches aren't there. I'm talking about Hooper. I'm talking about and Ikitau. They've been pretty good performers. And then, so not having those guys, and then obviously reflecting on the fact that they're coming off a couple of losses. So is there team selection modifications anyway as a result of that? The scrum performed poorly in the first half against the All Blacks in the last Test. So do you start Tupa? So you're going to get change there anyway. There's a few guys in the Australian A game playing this weekend. There'll be there's 3 or 4 there. Look like they're going to join onto the tour. So they'll be pushing their barrow this weekend, and once they're in with the squad, they suddenly become selectable. So there's a good chance for those guys to make a name for themselves this weekend. So there's a lot in the pot there for Joe to be able to think about, and then you've obviously got to not modify your game. I don't know if they'll change their game much. They've probably got a bit already sorted. They'll probably stick to how they've played against the British Lions, I would think. So that side of it, you still got to install new combinations and whatever. So there's a bit going on there, and you just wouldn't want to. You do poorly against Japan, and then it's the long tour. Then it starts looking like a real long trip, So because then you got to try and resurrect yourself against England, and then I don't know where the easy game is. I was watching that Six Nations series from earlier this year, and in Italy they were really good. When you look at it, they could have pipped a cup. They hit the goalpost in one game against France, could have won that. So they still got 2 wins. They beat Scotland and Wales. So they're tidy. So there's no easy games there. So no gimmies. So I don't know how they're going to deal with that mentally, but that's the challenge,
Now, before we get to that game at the National Stadium here in Tokyo on tomorrow week, we obviously have the match tomorrow, as Japan A or Japan 15 versus Australia A. How do you, again, like thinking about A games and the way that you use A games and the way you think about A games as a coach, how do you look at these, particular opportunities? Because it's not just this particular match. There are matches all over Europe that are being played where you've got Ireland A and England A and, everybody else is playing. So this notion of an A program, what benefits and what value does it create for a coach?
Well, it certainly wasn't so prevalent. I was pushing for what you call development tours and things like that. I mean, New Zealand's always sent the Maoris away. They've been working their All Black 15 program for some time. When I was 10 years ago, we weren't doing anything in that space, and that's sort of been gradually building, but it hasn't been a consistent program. But everyone else has been buying into it, so it gives you an opportunity to see players. It gives you an opportunity to bring players back in who have been maybe slightly long-term injured and need some fitness. So they're the obvious ones. So I'm looking at the Australia. If I look at the Australia A squad, it's a mixture of guys who've already played Test football, and there's a few guys there, interesting guys. Teddy Wilson, halfback, a few other guys like that, really good prospects in the long term. So Isaac Kalir, as the loose head, there's a few guys. The Rhymers there, but then that's interspersed with Pete Samu, who's been around a long time. And a couple of others. So Josh Canham, I'm a big fan of, the second rower. So those guys are all getting a run on the weekend. So I'll be watching. So they've got a chance to put their hand up, but they've got a mixture of whole stages around them. So it's how they come together as a team, but it's how those individuals perform, whether they can impress Joe and in fact impress Les Kiss as well, because they're probably trying to impress him also for the longer term. But they're next in too. Like some of these guys, because they're playing this weekend. Should they have an injury next weekend against Japan, it's likely Jay's going to pull from this squad that played this weekend. So they're near and dear. And as much as they've got Ikitau, Hooper and Skelton sitting in Europe, and probably a few others they could probably grab at short notice, these guys just played a game the weekend before. So they're the fittest the most match fit bunch of guys around. So it's going to be easier to grab one of those guys and haul them over there if there's a problem.
So, just in terms of the cycle, and as we're building towards, obviously, 2027, Australia's going to have a change in its coaching team. Not immediately. It's going to be happening in the middle of next year. But how should people be assessing or viewing the development of this Australian team if we consider that, the World Cup cycle is really how teams are produced and developed? What are some of the things that people should be looking for from the Australian team through this, not just the Japanese game, but through the end of the year? What are some of the things that we should look to that would give us confidence that things are improving? Because while there are elements of the game that have been good by the Australians, and they've been quite consistent, through this year. Still not finding quite the win ratio that I'm sure that they'd be looking for.
Well, they haven't played a lot of easy games this year. There's been pretty good quality opposition, so that's good because they've been competitive in that environment, but not winners. That's one of the stepping stones for me. Next year will probably be a better indication of where they're at because there's some confidence that comes out of all that. So that's one thing. You're going to have a change in coach. Logically, you'd think the new coach coming in, Les, would come in and you go, what's good and what's bad? You'll keep the good and maybe tinker with what he considers to be the bad. Now, I don't know what all of those things are specifically. It'll depend on his staffing. So that's another thing. You've got a whole bunch of staff. I've seen Cron obviously leave, but he's got a sort of overseeing role still, but he's not there. And I don't know the contribution of all those assistants and administrative people in and around the team. That could change significantly or not. So that's all to be revealed. So you've got to get the off-field side of it going at the same time you're trying to improve the on-field. The on-field's they've been competitive but not winning. Maybe this tour is a chance to get the wins and losses ratio better. So that's how I'd be looking at the tour, saying, well, we've been win loss, so we need to get in some win-win-wins. We need to get a winning band. I think. I was going back. I don't like talking about the past, but when I was there, we went on the tour at the end of 2013, I think it was, and we lost to England, and then we won the next 4 tests. Then we came back and we beat France at home 3-0, which hasn't happened before. So you suddenly got 7 tests in a row wins. So and people forget that because it's spread out over 2. But that's what you can achieve by having a successful end. You mightn't win the Triple Crown, whatever. You mightn't get a Grand Slam, but you get close, and you can build on it the following year with how you start that next year. So you've got to, and that's just win-win. So you start getting the habit of what I call a habit of winning. That's as much a habit as any other thing. You've got to try and get that going where they're just used to going out there and that's in 91. That's what we did. In 1990, you get the first win against the All Blacks, and then we got in the habit of beating the All Blacks for a couple of years. Never easy, but we still got in the habit of winning those tight games and not losing them. So that's a big opportunity. There's a maturing of all the players that's happening. That happens naturally, but they're just getting exposure. You get inoculated against playing against these good players. They've already played against the British Lions, so they've come up against the best of the best in this England team and the other teams they're going to play. They've already played against them this year, which is handy. There's familiarity there. There'll be familiarity, some of the detail around line-out work and scrummaging and things like that. That'll carry through because, Genge is playing. He'll be maybe playing for England, and some of those guys will be repeat opponents. And that, for me, the hardest part was always playing against someone you never played against. The first time you play someone you haven't played against, that's always the hardest time when you're scrummaging and things like that. When you play them the next time, it's always a little bit easier. So I think that's a benefit for the Wallabies. But then you've got to integrate all those other bits and pieces. So there's plenty to go on in this short term. And I think Joe's a decent guy, so he'll be trying to hand over a pretty good package to Les. But when he hands it over, it's not. I'd be surprised if no coach is just going to keep going with someone else's product. They're going to try and tinker and try and improve, and there's opportunities to do that. So that'll be the challenge for Les, is to try and work out what's good and what's bad, and doing that quickly, because he'll inherit it after the super season. I assume they'll be talking a lot prior to that, but he'll just inherit it, and he'll get that short preparation. And when there's a transition of coach, you get a short run into the test season. I had it, Eddie had it, like that's what happens. And so it's very hard to get the off-field, on-field going all at the same time and have it, going really well, because the voice is different. I don't know how Joe talks to the players in the dressing room, whatever. He's very intense and quite detailed. Les is similar. He was my defence coach when I was at the Waratahs, so I'm familiar with him, but that was a long time ago. So a long time ago. So, he's obviously moved on and become a head coach in his own right. So they're different voices, different characteristics, different emphasis, and importantly, the assistant coaches around them, those voices are going to be crucial too. And I don't know exactly who they're going to be, whether they're going to be some carryovers or it's a whole new group. That's the bit that's the real interesting bit for me.
Just that your views on that intangible of winning and building a winning habit, and it's not just necessarily the case of the Wallabies. You could look at any team that's competing in international rugby. How important is it that good performance translates into winning? And at what point does good performance that doesn't translate into winning become a problem? And it starts to sort of turn back on itself, where the doubt starts. It's like, it doesn't matter what we do, how well we play, we can't crack it for a win. And again, it's not necessarily talking just about the Australian team, because this is, this happens to every team in sport.
Being able to close out the close games is probably what is the skill. And if I think the All Blacks have done one thing, they've got a massive record, because they've been able to win the tight games quite often, whereas other teams have dropped those games, and you become that team that you're super competitive. The Irish team for many years were that. They give you a hard game, but they always lost. And the score was close, but they still lost. And so, and they were happy with that. And you don't want to be happy with that. And that's where from the Australian point of view, it's great that the Australian public are turning up and watching and getting excited by all of that. But in the end, they have to be rewarded too, because ultimately they want to see the scoreboard the right way. So you got to look at the starts of the game. We've talked about this earlier. If you look for a trend, the Wallabies are slow starters this year. They've been slow starters in all the games, and then so they've been chasing points, but they've been really good finishers, so good at chasing points at the other end of the game. But so you got to break it right down and start looking at and we've again touched on this a few times. Do you take shots at goal? Do you accumulate the points early? And we started to do that in the last test. We took some shots and then we moved away from it. And my notes that I take every week on those test matches show that the amount of times that we declined the 3 points option and went for the sideline, we didn't come up with pay. In Super Rugby, you get pay for that. The Reds did it all year and got pay. They got the Fezler was one of the leading try scorers because they got pay from their line-out drives. That hasn't converted at the national level. And that's one of the reasons is that you're playing against really good opposition, right? They know how to defend that stuff. So we haven't got the pay for that. So we've left points on the field, particularly early in the games, not in the last step, but in the earlier tests, we left points, and then we're able to score tries, and that's exciting for the crowd. But that's when we were chasing the game, so we took risks and we got reward. We haven't really been able to build a score where we've just taken those points, and I've watched it in the Six Nations. I've watched South Africa do it. They just took the points against Argentina and they built the scoreline that way. And the flashy stuff came at the end, but they'd already had a good scoreboard working for them, you know. So they kept the pressure on the whole time. Whereas I think we've missed opportunities in the first half to generate or to stay with the opposition, whatever. And then we've had to chase. And sometimes the Argentinian game in Townsville was one where we just left the run too late and we came up 2 points short, you know. So that's it. So you've got to start looking at all of those things and look at the difference between Super Rugby, and you've got to make sure that you're playing Test Rugby and not. You want to entertain. I get that, Beast, and that's a valuable and a merit. It's got merit in the Australian context because you've got to reward fans for turning up, and that's been happening. But the fans also want to see you win in the end. So that's where we're at now. We've got to try and get some of those tight games to go our way. And based on the cycle, you'd like to think that could be next year, but they're also still relying on some key players who mightn't be available, and the Skeltons and the like who are more senior. So we've got to work out where that looks, or whether we keep investing in these younger guys and keep bringing them through. Because I think if you're good enough, you're old enough. That's how I think. So I think Eddie made that pump with Jorgensen. That's paid off now. So it's been a 3-year deal. So I think we've got a bunch of guys that are coming to that 3-year, off the 3-year sort of cycle. And then a few others that we just need to play a bit better, the Tupu and those sort of guys, you know. But we didn't pick him last test. And I don't know why, because the scrum had been going really well in the first half, and then we gave away a bunch of penalties in the first half against the All Blacks, and we were chasing that. So anyway, we're shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit. So hopefully we get that right on this tour. That's something that could be a real opportunity to try and get those things right, get away to a good start and have the opposition chasing us. And then we get paid for the defence and the defence and the tackling, the passion that goes in the tackling. You really get paid for that because the opposition's the one that's got to be chasing the game.
Mm. All right. Well, listen, time as always, we like to feature the third voice from our many thousands of listeners, viewers, watchers. Interestingly enough, we had found a statistic last week that 40% of our viewers on YouTube watch it on their connected televisions. So there you go. Who knew that people sit down and actually watch this on their TV? So hello to all of you sitting there on your connected TVs, and a big hello to a number of people who reached out. Kane Limbrecht from Copenhagen, Charlie Mondelli from London, Hayden Creel from Finland. It just goes to show that there's just this wonderful diaspora of rugby around the world. And people have a care for it. And this is another reason why I don't think R360 is going to work, because rugby is a sort of a, socio-economic, construct, if I could call it that. It's much, much more than just a professional sport. So anyway, we'll leave that for another time. But interestingly, a couple of people came back from last week, and Lindsay Jacobs from YouTube, who did ask the question last week, which I did put to you, Ewen McKenzie, and Lindsay says, thanks for putting my message forward regarding the scrums and the penalty advantage. The main thing I want to clarify is the limit advantage to 3 phases. And if no advantage gained, go back for the penalty, not advantage over. You get 3 phases to strike, and if not, back for the penalty. So does that clarify that position?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I wasn't. That's how I interpreted it. It was like playing a short advantage and then game. But I didn't say advantage. I agree. It can't be advantage over, depending on the nature of the infringement. But further to our discussion, I talked about last week about things like, for instance, putting the ball straight in the scrum, making a contest out of that, and other aspects there. Interestingly, I noticed that there's an article during the week from France saying that the French refereeing director has decided that, and he's done this already in the top 14, that they're going to make a point about administering the laws of the game as they exist and make the teams put the ball in the middle of the scrum.
Yeah.
What's happened apparently is, the penalty count's gone from 27 to 60 or something like that in the early part of the top 14. However, there has made a contest at the scrum again. So so there as a country, France have decided that that's important. So I applaud them. I'll be interested to see how that all rolls out. I mean, sure, there's always a penalty backlash when you go back, but they're not creating new laws. They're actually just enforcing the laws as they are. Well, someone's decided not to worry about that, and I think that's a good thing. And so I'm kind of hoping that'll evolve into bringing back the contest in the scrum simply by putting the ball in the middle, and that will then hopefully permeate out into some of the other national unions, and they'll start doing the same and see that and the total result being that the scrum becomes an important contest again.
Yeah. But this is the issue, isn't it? Is that, when there's different emphasis placed in different countries at different times, the game evolves in a different way in those places, because I'm sure while the penalty count has gone up, as the teams adjust, it'll come down. Because they'll understand.
Well, it wasn't explained what the penalties were for. So the penalties could well be, they put the ball in the middle and then one scrum dominates the other, and so therefore that you derive a penalty. It wasn't that the penalty is all related to the feed. So we need to get more information about that, and it's early days. So but I'm just saying, for those that have the capacity, watch the top 14 scrums. If you get a chance to watch, see how that's going from a listener point of view. If you want to see what difference that makes, if you get a chance to watch the top 14, have a look and see how the scrums are looking in the competition for a contest point of view.
And I do think that Eddie Jones' idea of gathering the top 16 referees underneath World Rugby. They work for World Rugby. They respond to World Rugby. They referee the international games. I think that could be a solution, because while ever the referees belong to their national unions, they will come with some sort of reflection of that. And I think consistency at the end of the day, if there is a sort of an elite squad, I think the ICC does it in cricket, where there's that elite squad where they all work together and they just roll around and do the work. I think that just makes a lot of sense to me and wouldn't cost very much.
I think there's merit then. When you get to the World Cup, the referees all put on the refereeing jersey for the World Cup, and they look like a team. They're a team. Whereas generally speaking, my memory of it is that, if an Australian referee goes to South Africa, he puts on the South African refereeing colours, or if you go to New Zealand, you put on whatever that is. It's almost like you're not representing the home union, but it's sort of like you're identifying with the local scenarios. Where it's better if they just turned up all wearing the same international refereeing jersey.
But I think they do. And I think they do now. I think that.
Okay. That's the start.
I think that's moved on.
You need to look like a group, but I think contracting in that way, that takes the pressure off the national unions anyway financially. So because ultimately they're a cost. It's not just the referee; it's the 5 or 6 that go with them, travelling around as a team. Not even, and there's referee assessors. Don't forget, they're the ones judging the referees. So they can fill a bus, the referee community. Don't worry about that. Well, you think about a team. The team bus arrives and there's a bus of referees. So they're pretty good.
Anyway, we'll keep on, and we have reached out once again to World Rugby and negotiating with them the appearance. So for those of you who are worried, yes, we are still sticking at it. Now, Coat Night, I won't go through your global rugby calendar idea, but what I would like to do is to put that up on Substack so people can read through it, because you've put a lot of thought into it. So thank you very much for that. Tanner 2 has said, I heard Werner Warner Dearns is actually coming back to New Zealand next year and will play Super Rugby for the Hurricanes. Could he potentially want to play and get picked for the All Blacks next year? Well, listen, I am on the ground in Tokyo this week, and I am going to track down Warner Dearns, and I'm going to ask him that very question. Is he going back to New Zealand? And in fact, is he or does he want to play for the All Blacks at some stage? Because I would have thought now that he's captaining Japan, it's not an easy thing for him to do. Now, Trilly, great talk. Can't wait to see the undercover comedian Eddie again. And David, you haven't asked him yet about it. And no, I haven't, but I will. And I'll be sure to do that next week. And 4W there on YouTube says, just going back to the point of deducting points. If a player is sent off for 20 minutes or even worse, a permanent red, that player should still be sanctioned post-game. The team suffers immediately, ? So whether it's after the game or during the game, it is the same. This would make players be way more wary of reds and yellows. Other sides usually score anyways when a man down. So having players on the field all the time is the best win we could ask for. Maybe 7 points is too much. What do you think about 5? Ewen McKenzie, what do you think of that?
Yeah, my problem is that I think the fans want a contest, right? So you want to see the same number of people on the field. So I think the punishing the team, because a lot of the yellow cards now are individual actions, right? So we're punishing the team for an individual for people. The other team members can't control inadvertent actions on the field. And I've really got a problem with the yellow cards where things happen, and like the knockdown, where someone goes to the bin for something that I don't think it's necessarily a cynical action. I think it's one of the great aspects of the game when you see an intercept try or something like that. For me, you're discouraging that by having the yellow card penalty. You're discouraging what's potentially an exciting part of the game, because they can tap the ball up in the air and try and regather it, but slapping it down on the ground, I understand. So you're penalising the whole team for that one person's potential moment of brilliance, but maybe it turns to custard. So I think we've got to be reevaluating what we're giving yellow cards for, and then maybe you can look at the points reduction. But I find that messy. I just find that bit messy. I think it's better if the player's punished post game, and you get the same message. Like if you accumulate 2 or 3 yellow cards, and you can't play the following test. You don't get to wipe it out by pretending you're going to play club football or something like that in the off weekend. That doesn't happen. No, you can't play the next test. Doesn't matter if it's next year. So you get punished regardless. Now, the only time that wouldn't happen is if a guy announces his retirement, goes out and starts doing stupid things, and he never gets punished. But that scenario's a one-off. I think it's outlier. On the whole, the team gets to play 15 on 15, and you find out who the best team is, not the best team who can beat 14 guys. Because it doesn't. Occasionally, a team with 14 scores a try, and occasionally maybe they can work through a game scenario. But generally speaking, the other team will get a massive advantage, and I just don't think it's warranted based on all the different yellow card scenarios that we're seeing at the moment. So I think we've got to try and maybe review that, and then look at the other side of it, the sanction side of it.
Very good. Well, listen, thank you, Third Voice, for once again sending in your comments, your questions, and please keep them coming. It's a strong part of the program, I think, where we can bring voice to people who are thinking about the game and who care about the game wherever you are in the world. And we'll continue to bring you the insights of 2 of the best coaches in the game to answer those questions and think about how is it that we can help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. So that does it for this week's program. I am now in Tokyo, and I will be working most of the weekend. Ewen McKenzie, I'm catching up with Will Genia tomorrow, who has now moved into the coaching ranks. Perhaps you inspired him. He's now coaching at the Kanetsu Liners, and they're taking on Richie Mwanga's Toshiba side.
Oh, well, Send him my regards.
I will. I'll most definitely do that. Look forward to talking to Will about where does he think Japanese rugby fits in, and how can it help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And again, as I mentioned earlier, there's all sorts of people that we're going to be speaking to during this week leading up to the big test match at the National Stadium here in Tokyo tomorrow week. So looking forward to that. So thank you, everyone. We've run a bit longer today than we normally do, but very grateful again for your ongoing support. And please, if you could, share, like, subscribe, comment, ask a question, do anything you can across the platform, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, wherever you like to engage with Rugby Unity, please. We look forward to your contributions. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.